Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1448 is a bill that we brought to fix an oversight and a distribution of gaming revenue. I was contacted by the comptroller's office to advise me that in a bill that was passed back in 2019 that allowed Gary to move their casino to land-based in the handling of the licenses, there was a clawback for some of the other casino communities that would be negatively impacted. And unfortunately, well, that was supposed to take place over 4 consecutive years. And we are now in the 4th year. Unfortunately, the previous 3 years, that withholding and distribution did not take place. And what this bill does is essentially make that happen, albeit 3 years late. The 4th year, we're in the 4th year, it can be distributed according to law, no questions, no issues. What the bill does is the comptroller's office calculated what the actual distribution, withholding and distributions would have been had they been done on time. So we've been very specific in making sure that those exact dollars would be distributed over the course of, withheld and distributed over the course of the next 3 years, so not to overly impact the city of Gary all at one time. It was an oversight, but I have to say it was an oversight by everybody involved. The city of Gary didn't catch it, and the other communities that are to receive money, the cities of East Chicago and Michigan City, neither of them raised their hands and said, hey, weren't we supposed to get something? And so unfortunately it got to this point. And so this is to give the comptroller the legal authority to move forward under this plan. And I tried to do it in what I thought was probably the fairest way possible. I may have some that disagree with me. I see we do have Mayor Melton here, which is good. Do we have any other elected officials from Northwest?
Councilors.
Oh, okay, very good. But from East Chicago or Michigan City, anybody here? All right. Just wanted to check. Thank you for being here, Mayor and councilors. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If you'd like to testify, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you, Representative Slager. I'm Elise Nishal. I serve as the state's comptroller. Thank you for hearing House Bill 1448 and appreciate working to find a solution to the supplemental distribution that was in the 2019 gaming bill, which was House Enrolled Act 1015. This law requires distributions over a 4-year period of time, 2022 to 2025, as was mentioned, to East Chicago, Michigan City, and Hammond from the City of Gary's share of the wagering tax when certain conditions are met. Toward the end of last year, Legislative Services Agency reached out to my office regarding the implementation of this law. We recognized that the distributions had not been adjusted for the past 3 years and that we needed to begin making that adjustment for fiscal year 2025. We took quick action to communicate with legislators and local officials, and especially with Mayor Melton and his staff. I realize, coming from local government myself, that this is a difficult situation, and also recognize the members of the council here as well, and Comptroller Green. Especially for the year 2025, with Gary already having an advertised, adopted, and DLGF certified budget for the year. We do appreciate the several meetings that have taken place regarding this issue, and this bill is a step toward finding a workable resolution. With me today are members of my staff who are available to share from their knowledge on this topic. To my left here, General Counsel Jennifer Thuma, and Director of Accounting and Reporting, Fred Van Dorp. And I'd like to also invite up to join Ms. Thuma, Deputy Comptroller of Finance, Courtney Everett.
Thank you. Go ahead,
All right.
please, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Representative Slager, for authoring House Bill 1448, and to Chairman Thompson for scheduling it for hearing. We really appreciate the committee members considering the bill. My name is Jennifer Thuma. As Comptroller Nishala said, I'm General Counsel for the office, and I would like to provide you with a little context for this bill and some background. So we need to look back, as Representative Slager said, to legislation that passed during the 2019 session. So House Enrolled Act 1015 was a big gaming bill with a lot of different subjects within it. One of those specific subjects was the addition of a new statute requiring supplemental distributions to designated cities from the City of Gary's share of the wagering tax. As we understand it, from studying the fiscal note for HEA 1015, with changes in the location and license of the Gary casinos, the legislature anticipated that wagering tax revenues might shift in the specific cities named in that part of the bill, in that supplemental distribution statute, with revenues potentially decreasing to East Chicago, Hammond, and Michigan City. So to compensate for that, the statute called for distributions for a limited time of 4 fiscal years from Gary's anticipated increased share. So 2 things had to happen per the statute. The statute required that Gary hit a cap for wagering tax each of the 4 fiscal years that was set to the 2019 level, which it did. Second, the 3 other named cities in that statute had to see a decrease in the wagering tax revenue. Hammond did not see a decrease in the revenue. It remained steady. So Michigan City saw a decrease in wagering revenue below the 2019 cap set in the statute for all 3 fiscal years. East Chicago saw a decrease below that 2019 cap for 2 of the fiscal years. Thus, the second prong of that statute was met, and Gary's share was over and above that 2019 cap that was set in statute. So the office was not aware of the change in the statute and continued making that wagering tax distribution as they always did without changes. As we want to note, the statute is limited to 4 fiscal years, and after that time period, the supplemental distributions would not be made any longer. Thus, the fiscal years in which the payments were to be made by the Comptroller's office, those went by. The supplemental payments were made to the City of Gary instead of the other cities. So that brings us to fiscal year 2025. Wagering tax revenues will continue coming in until June 30th of 2025, and then we'll know then what the total amount will be that is owed from Gary to the other cities as the law is currently written. We know that the total additional amounts distributed to the City of Gary by the Comptroller's office from 2022 to 2024 for those missed fiscal years is a little over $12 million so far. And then again, we won't know that total altogether until the end of the fiscal year of 2025. That could be up to an additional $6 million per the statute and the formula. So thus far, we know that Gary has met the statutory cap that was put in law in 2019, that first prong of revenue tied to that year. So now we need to see what those levels will be for Michigan City, East Chicago, and Hammond the rest of this fiscal year. The Comptroller's office just began withholding from Gary for 2025 a few days ago to ensure compliance with the statute. And then the city won't receive any additional distributions of wagering tax in fiscal year 2025 as a result. So Representative Slager's bill, as he explained, extends the time for an additional 3 fiscal years to lessen that impact on Gary's budget. So since we now know about the statute, we do have to begin applying it. And with that, I will go ahead and turn this over to our Deputy Comptroller, Courtney Everett, for any questions and additional comments.
Yeah, pleasure to be here as Deputy Comptroller over Finance, just here to answer any questions you may have regarding the fiscal of this bill.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Hearing none, then, we'll go on to testimony. I have first Mayor Melton. Mayor, welcome. I would hear this bill just to have you come down just to see you, but this is not the reason, but welcome, glad you're here.
Thank you.
And so, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the chairman, ranking minority member Porter, all of the committee members. I wish it was under better circumstances I was here, like the chairman mentioned. Just a couple of years ago, I sat in these seats as state senator, representing Senate District 3, which was Gary, Maryville, Hobart, Crown Point, Lake Station, and New Chicago. Today, I am joined with members of the Gary Common Council. We have Lori Peterson, Councilwoman of the 1st District, and we also have Linda Barnes-Caldwell, Councilwoman of the 5th District, and also brought our City Controller, Celita Green, that is here with us today. So hopefully, Mr. Chairman, after I speak, we'll allow them to come up and share their thoughts. I want to thank the Comptroller's Office. Comptroller's Office. See, they were very helpful, delivering some very disappointing news. It was very shocking to receive the information that we were going to take such a devastating blow in our budget. Imagine, if you will, either in your home budget or at your business, you work with your team, you work with your family to craft a budget to prepare for that next year, and you find out that a significant chunk is going to be withheld. For us as a city, that's going to have severe impact in many ways. Public safety is one that we are very mindful of as well. The thing I wanted to tout and celebrate today is the significant progress that the city is making fiscally. My primary focus coming into office was to stabilize our overall finances, which we've done, and to stabilize our population. And I'm happy to announce, based off the last interim census report, the population in Gary is growing. I believe the last number was 537 new residents have moved and relocated to Gary. And that was one of our last census information. Coming from this body, I knew, as I was ranking minority member on appropriations on the Senate side, fiscal responsibility was extremely important. So everything I learned from the legislature, I tried to translate that over into the city of Gary. Every single tool that this body made available to me as mayor, we are enacting that. Legislation like Senate Bill 434, which is the last piece of legislation that I authored, Representative Slager co-authored, that's providing us additional economic development tools for our downtown transit development districts. That's underway right now as we speak. $12 million, well actually $6 million for blight elimination. The Hard Rock Casino gave us $3 million. And we put our own local skin in the game, and I learned that term here. Local skin in the game, and matched that with another $3 million. So $12 million as we speak. We're working with the Northwest Indiana Regional Development Authority for blight elimination downtown Gary. Much progress is taking place at the airport with 2 new hangars is being built. Interested corporations from the Chicagoland area looking to relocate to Gary. So progress is actually happening and momentum is happening. House Enrolled Act 1015 was a very complicated piece of legislation. So much so, no one knew this language even existed. It was just a couple of months ago. So for the entire city of Gary, for the legislative bodies, and for the Comptroller's Office, I realized that The plan forward is going to be very critical, but I have to focus on the right now. Because even if we were to create a plan to move forward, that will help stretch out those payments. However, this year, and you just heard it clearly in their testimony, money will be withheld from the city as we speak. And how will we deliver quality service to these Hoosiers in Northwest Indiana? Just a couple things I want to mention. Historically, we know that in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, when gaming came to Indiana, Gary was the first to solicit the state to pass legislation for casinos. Gary had 2 licenses. We had 2 boats within Buffington Harbor. But when that legislation passed, 2 other communities also received casinos in East Chicago and in Hammond. So for 20 years, we had to compete sandwiched in between 2 other municipalities. There was no hold harmless language during that time to make us whole or to help make us solvent to ensure that that will take place. However, gaming is law of the land right now. We know that, and it's beneficial to the economy in the state of Indiana. But as we move forward, this will be catastrophic. Other legislation that's taking place that's helpful, the South Shore double tracking, Representative Slager helped pass that. That was my first session where the double tracking legislation for downtown Gary and the Miller Station will be historic, and it's already underway. Right now, with that new train station in Miller, 2 new restaurants have opened up, another one on the way, because of the investment this body made and future development opportunities within the downtown footprint as well. I've already talked about the airport, and as I conclude, Mr. Chair, I just want to share a few things. The impact that the comptroller's office have identified, to me, is going to be very hard to verify that Hard Rock Casino was the reason why they lost the revenue. Why do I say that? And we all remember when COVID-19 happened and when the state started shutting down. It was actually that night when the session ended. Many of us were heading home and the state and federal government was shutting down. So that equation is going to have to include that time frame, not only when COVID-19 happened, but also when the executive orders from the governor took place to limit the casinos to opening, but also when it opened back up, there was a limitation on who and how many people can be associated inside that facility. So those are things I'm hoping that this body will take in consideration as we talk about hold harmless. Take that in consideration so Gary will not be impacted in that effort. I also want to mention 2 other casinos in downtown Chicago and in the south suburbs of Chicago opened up at the same time. Not our fault. How can we determine how much of an impact the Hard Rock was versus all of these other factors? So I think we have a very peculiar situation when it comes down to how do we verify that Gary's casino was the impact. Lastly, I'll say this, and I appreciate Representative Slager. We talked in the hallway. He said, I want to do this as fair as possible, and I respect that because we know that Michigan City and East Chicago, now that everyone knows, they're expecting something to come, right? And I have a great relationship with those mayors, so I'm here to represent my city. That's the best way I can put it. So let's look at the cap that was mentioned. 2002, there was a cap legislatively established for these casinos regionally. In 2002, the cap for Gary was $12.6 million, and it still is over 20 years. East Chicago's cap is $13.5 million, and it still is. Hammond's cap is $13.7 million, and Michigan City is $9.5. We went from the lowest revenue generated casino in the state to the highest for the past 3 years, and we're still receiving the same amount for the past 20 plus years. So we still haven't benefited fiscally overall from the growth that's taking place from the revenue that's generated from Hard Rock. we're still receiving that same cap. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. What are some alternatives? I believe, and I'm just going to throw some recommendations out there, and hopefully we can come up with amendments. I think a quick and easy fix will be, and I'm saying this from the lens of previously being a legislator. I don't know how mostly the body probably would think. I know the state don't want to cough up any money. I know that. However, keep this in mind. In the legislation that we both co-authored, in 2025, fiscal year 2025, starting in 2026, there will be an additional $18 to $25 million of increased wagering taxes that's coming from Hard Rock to the state of Indiana. When we passed House Enrolled Act 1015, the state allowed Hard Rock to continue to pay as if they had 2 gaming licenses. That rolls off in 2025, and that increase in wagering taxes come to the state. If that is so, in 2024, that's going to allow us to have the matching funding for a convention center in Northwest Indiana, ideally in Gary. And it's also going to give us the matching dollars for a brand new train station in our downtown development. $5 million, I believe, for both matching up to a certain dollar amount. So there's room within dollars that's not even budgeted yet from the state in that wagering tax increase that I believe that can hold every community harmless. It's still revenue generated from the Hard Rock that was yet to come to the city that could be intercepted and to pay Michigan City, East Chicago, Hammond if necessary, and allow the city of Gary to sustain that we currently are right now and continue on the path and trajectory. I'm going to ask our Councilwoman, Lori Latham, Vice President of the Council, if she can come forward and share some thoughts, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions for me.
Any questions right now? Go ahead then, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. I do have some prepared remarks, but I need to say 2 things before I get started. One, I'm not sure I fully understood what it took for you all to be here. A 4-hour committee meeting for us would be nearly unheard of. They are few and far between. They are only special occasions. So I just want to say I have a renewed respect for what you do. Also, I don't think that I fully understood the impact that this would have on us today. When my council colleagues and I passed our 25 budget, we fell out with the mayor. We fell out with each other. We fell out with constituents trying to get what we thought we needed to get done with the money we were expecting. And hearing that it's going to be less than what we expected actually triggered a very painful story for me. And I remember being here before. I was a junior in college. Somehow I was overpaid my my federal student aid. I didn't know because I don't make those calculations, right? That money went to the bursar's office. When I registered for my classes, they told me how much I would get and they paid my tuition. It wasn't until a month in when I realized I had been purged from my classes because my tuition wasn't paid because of an error that was made in calculating my federal aid. And this story just today reminded me of that pain when you have expected something and something completely, seemingly outside of your control stands to interrupt the very nature of what you are doing to try to get ahead. So I just wanted to share those 2 things, even before I go into my prepared remarks for you, Chairman Thompson, for our ranking minority member, all of the members of the committee and members of the public. Like the mayor said, I am Lori Latham. I'm the presiding officer of the Gary Common Council. I think I mentioned this before, but I'm joined by my colleague, Linda Barnes-Cardwell. She's our parliamentarian and our 5th District Council person. And together, we have waited all this time to oppose this bill, at least in its current form. Our mayor talked about this, the intent of the historical 2019 legislation, which very successfully has begun to give our community the ability to lead our own economic revitalization, was never really about gaming, even though, I mean, I love a good slot machine just like everybody else. Instead, it was an opportunity to optimize our casino license, one of the many economic development tools very gratefully created by this body through legislation, and allow us to use every asset at our disposal to catalyze our city's economic development progress and upward mobility. As the mayor outlined, we have, in naming our projects, our ongoing projects, we have faithfully, intentionally, and deliberately seized those tools to improve the quality of life and economic viability of our city. The anxiety rises in me when I think of how just with one stroke of a pen, this legislation could serve to undo a lot of the work that we have done collectively to make Gary a better place to live, work, learn, and play. And to be clear, I think the mayor mentioned this, we never seek any harm to any other local community. And I am 100% sure that that is not your intent either. But this bill, in its current form, unfortunately, will do just that. It will set us back. It will unravel the measurable progress that we're making for our city. And for what? Right? Is this about potential economic harm? Because the definition of potential is having or showing the capacity to become or develop into something in the future, which begs the question, is there a dollar amount to this potential harm? Has it been measured? I see that it's been statutorily established, but has that really been measured? Can we be sure this is that number? Are we sure that this isn't just speculative? And is that potential even worth doing something that we know would be counterproductive and quite frankly confusing to the progress of another important economic driver in this state? Is this about righting something that has been done wrong? If so, and y'all know I'm about to close when I start quoting the Bible, I humbly submit that John 9:1-4 may have some biblical wisdom that I believe we should be mindful of. I know you all know this. Jesus is passing by, saw a man who had been blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, who sinned? This man, his parents, that he would be born blind? Jesus answered, it was neither this man that sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must carry out the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. To reiterate, we are not here because of something we did or didn't do. This was not our error. We couldn't have caught this error because the calculation of any kind of perceived loss could only have been made by the state. And if the Bible is true, and I believe it is true, we don't pay for our father's mistakes. And in the same way, we should not have to pay for this oversight. Neither should Michigan City, neither should East Chicago. Instead, we should continue to carry out the works, rebuilding our community and the state, and remain committed to the hard work that we, and I say that the city, the legislator, all of us, our mayor, remain committed to the hard work that we have done together over the last few years. I thank you for all your time.
Thank you. Representative Judy, question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. This is a line item in your city budgets, the four cities, since riverboats came about. So this has always been in your budget, but in 2019, when we passed that law, it allowed for an additional distribution within that. Now, I'm reading this right. You have a max. These are your max that you can collect from that tax, correct? Each city has a max.
Right, that's been set since 2002.
Hammond was at that max, so they hadn't received anything.
Right.
So as this distribution came out in 2022, 2023, 2024, you couldn't catch it because you already had that line item. You just thought that the revenue had increased, but you never hit the max. Gary never hit the max of what you could collect, correct?
Right. I'm going to ask our controller, Celita Green.
I'm just trying to paint the picture. So the other two cities that received less didn't recognize it because they were just receiving less, but they didn't actually know because it would only be the state that actually knew on that distribution.
Yeah, I think the problem is no one knew this language existed to distribute, that Gary had to distribute anything for any perceived loss. I think that's the original issue that we're looking at, that this is new to everyone. It's new to the state and it's new to each and every other community. So if Ms. Green, if you want to see if you can address some of the cap issues and how we perceive this will be impact.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Good evening, and I'm Celita Green, City Controller. Thank you for allowing me to speak. For the casino funds, we have a cap of $12 million, and I just want to historically give you a little background information. From 2014 to 2017, the City of Gary casino revenues for wagering, the highest amount that we received during those years was $6.9 million. We were entitled to $12 million. From 2018 to 2024, the City of Gary casino wagering revenue was $64,724,000. We were entitled to $84 million. So during that period, we were short $19 million. Does that answer? Okay. So the impact of the $6 million, with the budget that we currently have, our collection rate is about 88%. We have not, in over 20 years, received 100%. In addition to that, we use the entire $12 million of wagering to supplement our budget. We use $6 million of the LDA. We use a portion of our seated, and the rest of it is miscellaneous revenue, as well as any balance that we are able to carry over the next year. For 2024, the budget was $65 million. We only increased less than 1% to $65 million. So the $15 million that we have allowed for 2025 in our budget will be reduced by the $6 million. And the only way this year that we can make up that difference is $5 million that we have in reserve. We'll have to ask the council to release it as part of an agreement with UMB for a loan that we received. And we will still have to reduce $500,000, $500,000. For this year, I want to mention that we plan, or we hope when we close our books as of February 28, to have an ending balance of $3 million. That is included in the loss for this year of $500,000. It is projected that the next year that we will lose $9 million. The following year, a deficit of $19 million. This is all cumulative. And the last year, a deficit of $27 million. These were prepared by myself as well as our financial advisor.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Any more? Mayor Melton, you would like somebody else to testify? You're welcome to, of course.
Anyone else? If I can just close really quick, and thank you to both the council members that are here and Ms. Green and Senator Mark Spencer. I know Representative Earl Harris also represents Gary and many other communities, and Dr. Vernon Smith. As I close, I just say, let's keep an open mind on how we address this issue. Historically, the city of Gary has felt like it hasn't fully been a part of the state at some times, right? And I think that started to change over the last few years because of the collaboration that's took place in the legislature. You know, Representative Thompson, you were very instrumental on returning the Gary School Corporation back to local control. That was monumental. And right now, the district is growing its population and is solvent financially and making great strides, something that we're proud of. But we always seem to feel every time we take a couple of steps forward, there's a couple of steps that knock us back. So it's our hope that this body will keep that in mind. I know this is a long process. You're going to have a lot of folks coming and lobbying from different directions and angles and perspectives. But just know at the end of the day, the city of Gary right now is going to hold the burden in the bag. And if the state of Indiana could step in, like Councilwoman said, and help facilitate hold harmless for everyone, that would be the ideal situation where those other communities, if they feel like it was Hard Rock Casino, they can be made whole, and the city of Gary wouldn't have to foot the bill at the end of the day. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you again.
Thank you. Representative Slager, you want to talk, Representative Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for Northwest Indiana coming down to testify in regards to 1448. A comment, and I think I talked to the comptroller, they made a presentation and alluded to this situation in regards to 2019 legislation. And today, the comment was made that, you know, some people need to be held accountable, but it's a state. We didn't do what we were supposed to do, y'all, when it came down to it. It's not this comptroller here, but previous. And because of somebody else's neglect or not doing what they're supposed to do, now we have a community that has to suffer potentially for that situation. We had staff ask last year about the whole harmless situation. And Representative Thompson, remember the bill. You know, we talked about that. And someone dropped the ball. And it wasn't the city of Gary. So I just hope if we as a state, we have, and we've had numerous conversations, and Representative Harris and others have conversations. I hope we as a body continue to have that meaningful conversation how to make this situation a lot better, or better for a city that at one time, I was younger, at one time was an economic engine for the state of Indiana. And now they're becoming to be the economic engine for Northwest Indiana also. So I just hope that we don't forget about Northwest Indiana. And I'm just, you know, I'm not upset. I just want us to think about that. And I'm willing to work with anyone that we can, Representative Slager and his bill, the comptroller, everyone. But I'm here to help in regards to this with my colleagues from Northwest Indiana, and to help with East Chicago and Hammond and Michigan City, et cetera. So we as a state didn't do what we were supposed to do.
Thank you. Representative Harris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to fellow Northwest Indiana people for coming down, and Mayor, council people making the trip. For full disclosure, which was kind of alluded to, I represent the cities of Gary, East Chicago, and Hammond. So 3 of the cities are cities that I represent. So when we were going through this the first time, it was an adventure, but it was a good adventure. One of the things, there's a few things I want to talk about here, and thank you, Representative Slager, for working on this process. When we ran into each other in the clerk's office and you said the comptroller was going to be calling me, I didn't know this is where we were going, but here we are. So as mentioned, we've had some conversations, we've had some Zoom meetings. You told me you were going to contact me when we ran into each other here at the State House as well. One of the things I want to say that I'm glad which has happened is this has not become the blame game. It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. So I want to thank everybody for that.